welcome to another episode of the Optimal Health Show. In today's episode, I got the opportunity to interview Morley Robbins. Now, if you haven't heard about Morley, he is like the crusader of magnesium. His nickname is the Magnesium Man, and he's all things magnesium. Now, Morley's passion and purpose for delivering the message about magnesium stems from his past, and we're going to find out today's episode why Morley is so passionate about magnesium, why magnesium is so crucial for your health, and many other elements that you probably never heard about. In fact, like, how is magnesium connected to your DNA? And wow, in fact, magnesium is needed for your glutathione? Fantastic. But before we actually begin today's episode, I just want to make sure if you have the opportunity to head over to helpmesleepsolution.com. This is where I'm offering my free 7-week sleep course. That's right, guys, free. All you got to do is head over to the website and enter your name and email address. Now on with the show. And we got another show today, guys. We have a special guest, Morley Robbins. Hello, Morley. How you doing?
Amir, I'm doing great. Doing great. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. Thank you. I know you're a busy person. You're on your conquest for fighting about magnesium. I'm very happy you took your time today to educate us about the importance of magnesium. And that brings me to a question I want to ask you is like, how did you begin this journey into the whole world of magnesium?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Our life always makes perfect sense when we look backwards. And I'm a pre-med retread. I had designs of being a doctor when I was in college. My organic chemistry professor, Gordon Galloway, saw it differently, and he made sure that I was never going to go to medical school, and I've thanked him many times since then. But I went into the hospital field. It was the most natural place for me to go. I was an executive that focused on strategic planning and marketing, and I was really good at helping clients fill their hospital beds. That was actually one of my better techniques, and I did that faithfully for 32 years, both as a employee within hospitals, and that was for 12 years, and then 20 years as a consultant. And about 4 years ago, there was a series of events that coalesced. I developed what's called frozen shoulder.
Okay.
I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I couldn't lift my hand above my waist.
Wow.
And I was doing a research project for a client in North Carolina that was seeking to know what's going to be the volume of chronic disease in North America in 2025. And we were doing this study in 2008, and we were taking a peek, several years out. And the numbers were so alarming. It was like a hockey stick. All these different diseases, heart disease, cancer, mental illness, you name it. They were all just taking off, and we're going to continue to rise. And I realized then I couldn't stay on the sidelines. And I had to deal with the shoulder. Friends had suggested that I go see a Dr. Liz, who was practicing in the Chicago area, and I said, well, that sounds like a chiropractor, and I don't do witchcraft, so I'll just buy some supplements. And a couple months later, came back to the same health food store in writhing pain, wasn't sleeping, and you would relate to that, the lack of sleep and how it really screws you up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, big time. And they said, Morley, we love you. Go see Dr. Liz. So with my tail between my legs, I went to see Dr. Liz, and she's one of the gifted healers on this planet who practices what's called network spinal analysis. And within a couple weeks, I had the full mobility and rotation of my shoulder joint. And prior to that, I knew in a yardstick of healing, 35 inches of it was allopathic, and 1 inch was a bunch of weirdos that did all sorts of crazy things. And my whole universe flipped after that experience. And I realized that there are 35 inches of gifted healers, and 1 inch is a bunch of people with an MD after their name. And what I've come to realize is that the MD is actually short for magnesium deficient. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But about 2 years ago, some of our clients, and then of course I became a wellness coach 4 years ago, actually hooked up with Dr. Liz, both professionally and personally. We are kind of reuniting after many lifetimes. And about 2 years ago, clients started asking me to write more about what we were doing, how we were solving some really complex problems with just natural healing, good diet, and then focused mineral supplementation with whole food supplements. And I started, exploring that, and I wrote an article about how to make a heart attack.
Huh.
Because having a heart attack is way too passive, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to go on the offense, and you want to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a 10-step plan, and step number 8 was deplete your body of magnesium. And I had read it in an article that magnesium was important for heart health, and I just was being what I thought very cute when I said that. And I had a client of mine who was a writer review the piece. She said, "Love it," and she said one thing that changed my life. She said, "But I can't help but believe that magnesium isn't more important than you think it is." And I was like, okay. And that was July of 2011. And I went out and I bought Carolyn Dean's book, The Magnesium Miracle, and I couldn't put it down. It was like I was reconnecting with some experience that I'd had in a prior life, and I became obsessed with this mineral. And only to realize that when you really pull back the curtain on the hospital industry, the reason why everyone's sick is because they are lacking minerals, and most importantly, they're lacking the regulatory mineral, and that's how I got into it.
So you would say that that actual book, Carolyn Dean's Magnesium book, was a catalyst that actually started everything?
Without question. For anyone who wants to learn more about magnesium, that would be the first book you want to read. She wrote it 10 years ago, and I think it's on its. She's revised it, I think, once or twice now. She's gone from being just this faceless inspiration to being a very good friend of mine, and she's welcoming me into this fold of trying to educate the world about magnesium. And what I've since done is read 18 other books and 750 articles about magnesium and magnesium deficiency, and I've categorized them along 18 different diseases, chronic diseases, and every one of them is born of magnesium deficiency. And what the medical communities and the research communities are beginning to agree on is that all chronic disease is a function of inflammation. And what the research team out of George Washington University Medical Center, headed up by William Weglicki, Dr. William Weglicki, is that all inflammation is triggered by magnesium deficiency.
Wow.
Period.
Wow.
That's the epicenter. And he and his team have published in the last to prove that point. So that's been a very galvanizing set of material for me to work with.
This brings me to a question, though, is I find this really, really like shocking when DNA is replicating, it needs magnesium. Can you explain that for our audience a little bit more?
I laugh because if people knew what I got in college in organic and inorganic chemistry, they'd say, "Right, wait a minute, who is this guy?" What's important to understand is that there are. Let's just talk about some big numbers. There are over 3,700 proteins in the human body that have a receptor site for magnesium. There's no other mineral that comes close to that level of importance in the production of proteins. Well, then we come down to the fact that somewhere between 350 to 500 enzymes are totally dependent on magnesium in order for them to get activated. Wow. Yeah. The 350 is the number you'll see all over the internet. You'll see that number just being passed back and forth by all these different experts. The reigning champions of magnesium research are a husband and wife team out of State University of New York in Brooklyn, SUNY Medical Center. Burton and Bella Altura are their names, and between them they have published over 1,000 articles on magnesium.
Wow.
They've just upped the number to over 500, and I'll accept their math as opposed to all the numbers that are on the internet. But then let's come down one more notch, and let's just talk about the kinase enzymes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even begin to understand what a kinase enzyme is, but what I do know is that 100% of the 150 kinase enzymes that run our body all depend on magnesium ATP in order to activate what they do. And one of the most important functions of the kinase enzymes is cell growth, cell mitosis. Important to understand is what does DNA do? What is its job in the body? It's to make proteins.
Yeah.
That's its primary job. I think it's its only job, actually. Well, you can't make any protein in the human body if there isn't magnesium present.
Yeah.
So that's how central
So
magnesium.
all the people spending their time in the gym like 2-3 hours a day thinking they're going to build their muscles or their performance, and if they're not supplementing with magnesium or getting magnesium rich foods, they're really like putting themselves on back end. Like they're not benefiting really from those workouts, exponentially how they should be.
No, they're not getting the optimal benefit.
The optimal benefit, yeah.
Part of the reason why I was a little bit late was I was over at a GNC and I was talking to one of the salesmen who was very buff. You'd be very proud of how ripped he was. And I love to ask these guys who are really in great shape. I say, I'm looking right in the eye and I say, I'm curious, how do you restore magnesium in your body? And it's like I hit him over the head with a bag of bricks. And they're like, oh, what's magnesium? And so I got into a song and dance about that. But the point to amplify what you've just said is that the process of building muscle requires, what's it require? You got to break it down, right? You got to break the muscle down, and then you got to rebuild it.
Yeah.
Well, what's muscle made out of? It's made out of protein.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't have magnesium ATP in order to energize that process, it doesn't happen. And so one of the great athletes in America is a guy by the name of Ryan Hall. He's the fastest marathoner that this country's ever produced. Well, guess what? After every workout, Ryan Hall does an Epsom salt bath. And if it's good enough for the fastest marathoner in the world, I'm pretty much going to dedicate myself to that as well.
Exactly. Well, you also mentioned before that Charles Poliquin, I know you've done some work with him. He has a level that he won't work with certain people unless their magnesium level's at a certain level, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, Poliquin's he's a magnesium rock star.
Mm-hmm.
He's got, I think, 8 articles now on his website that address the topic of magnesium. So for your listeners and viewers who are interested, that's just a great resource. The level that you're referring to is the blood test is called the magnesium red blood cell. It's also known as the MAG-RBC.
Mm-hmm.
And it measures the magnesium saturation in the red blood cell. You say, well, that's pretty cool. Well, I'm going to come back to why that's important in just a minute. But just to amplify what you've just said, that Charles Poliquin will not work with you unless your MAG-RBC is at least 6.0 milligrams per deciliter.
Mm.
And the average person is either the 4s or the 5s. And they're usually shocked when they find out how low they are. What's important to understand is that the 1962 reference range for the MAG-RBC was 5.0 to 7.0 milligrams per deciliter. It has now been moved down to 4.0 to 6.2, which is proof positive that we are becoming magnesium deficient. Most of the lab technicians or pathologists don't know about that 1962 reference range. That's a very important piece of information to have. But back to the red blood cell for just a minute. Again, oxygenation is a big thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
In bodybuilding or just in general. Well, turns out the very process of producing oxygen comes by way of plants. Can't do it without it, right? And it's brought to us by way of chlorophyll. Well, guess what activates chlorophyll? Magnesium. So the very process of creating oxygen is made possible by magnesium. And then the process of attaching it to our red blood cells, it's fascinating. The number of red blood cells in your body is dependent upon the availability of magnesium ATP. The production of hemoglobin, guess what? It's a protein. Can you guess what it's required? It requires magnesium.
Magnesium, yeah.
But there are enzymes that put oxygen on the hemoglobin, and there are enzymes that take oxygen off and put it in the tissue.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go way out on a limb, Amir. Can you guess what divalent metabolic mineral activates those enzymes?
Let me guess. Could it possibly be magnesium?
Ding, ding, ding. And so the very process of creating oxygen to saturating our tissues requires magnesium. And not many people who know the yin-yang of that.
Well, I find it so funny when I keep on hearing people talking about antioxidants. For example, we'll talk about the so-called master antioxidant, glutathione, right? But little known fact is, to actually produce glutathione, you need magnesium.
That's right.
Right? Yeah. So people can be taking all these abundance of so-called super antioxidant pills, but if they're deficient in mag, it's not going to work.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the big three for antioxidants, and again, when I was talking about all those enzymes, the 500 enzymes and the 150 kinase enzymes, those guys reside inside the cell. And in fact, most of them are inside the mitochondria, which is where the power is, right? The number of mitochondria in the cell is dependent upon magnesium status. That's important to know. But what's also key here is that if the individual doesn't know that the three biggest antioxidants inside the cell are glutathione, vitamin C, and vitamin E. Now, what most of your listeners and viewers may not know is that, you're right, you can't make glutathione without magnesium. It's actually activated by selenium, which is important to know, but the pathway, the glutathione pathway, must have magnesium ATP. And then, just to make it more exciting, you can't activate vitamin C and you can't activate vitamin E unless magnesium is present. All these supplements that people take, especially, I love how people take these mega doses of ascorbic acid. Well, did you know that ascorbic acid is just the antioxidant shell of the whole food vitamin C complex? In the center of the vitamin C complex is actually tyrosine. I mean, it's like, and that's the magic of, because the tyrosine needs the magnesium in order to bring the whole thing to life. Yeah.
And then people complaining about like their thyroids, T3, T4, when in reality it might not even be the tyrosine, but the lack of magnesium controlling your T3, T4.
Yeah, and the way it works is, I think the big culprit in most people's body for the breakdown of T4 to T3 is copper toxicity, because copper, it's really important, right? It's particularly important for building muscle and for metabolizing glucose. We know that. But copper needs to be attached to an important protein called ceruloplasmin. What the heck's that? Well, it's what brings copper to life. There are 3 steps to move inorganic copper to the attached form with that protein. All 3 steps require magnesium ATP. And what happens in a lot of people's body is they don't have enough magnesium to complex with the ATP, and so copper without that protein is a heavy metal. It's very disruptive, and it blocks the conversion of T4 to T3. That's where most people get bollocks in their thyroid function. At least in my.
I find that interesting. You just mentioned earlier about glucose and sugar, and I know you and I were talking about previously, the more sugar you eat in a diet actually starts depleting your magnesium. And I forget actually what the ratio was, something like 1 molecule of sugar depletes like 56 or something molecules of magnesium. You can like refresh my memory, but like that's insane. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. The sucrose molecule, which is what sugar is, it's actually one part glucose and one part fructose. And I'm not quite sure how they get combined, but they do get combined. But independently, it's 28 molecules of magnesium to metabolize glucose and 28 molecules of magnesium to metabolize fructose.
Wow.
So that one molecule of sucrose eats up 56 molecules. Now, truth be known, some of that's getting recycled. But that's only getting recycled in a body that's not stressed. You know anyone who's dealing with stress these days?
I never heard that word before. What is it?
That's actually why I love one of your areas of focus is on sleep, because people completely blow off sleep as a source of stress.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the greatest causes of disruption in the body.
Yeah.
And you know, you can dance circles around what I know, but that's where most people get tripped up, is they think, well, I can burn the candle at both ends. And like, no, you can't actually. It doesn't work.
Yeah, and that's the thing people don't understand is like when you don't sleep properly and you don't handle your stress, you're literally a burning furnace of magnesium. You're depleting your body so exponentially that I call it cellular starvation.
That's a great way to describe it, because the way I've termed it with clients is I talk about their magnesium burn rate, and it gets so high they can't keep up with the demand, and that's when people begin to tank. And the whole issue of loss of energy. So when I was talking to this guy just a few minutes ago, he was complaining about not having energy. And I looked at him. I thought he was kidding. I'm like, really? Do you know how it's made in the body?
Yeah.
And he never knew. It's like, and he's a smart guy. I was really impressed with what he did know, but he didn't know that the way a biochemist spells energy is Mg-ATP. That's the energy molecule in the body.
Interesting. But also, would you say that like our modern day lifestyle right now, like eating the sad diet for the majority of people in the Western Hemisphere, sleeping, not according to your circadian rhythm, super stressing out, not getting enough fresh air, is this like exponentially even affecting our grandchildren for magnesium deficiency? Do you see a trend now happening? Like every single generation is going to get worse and worse and worse?
Should I be politically correct?
It's my show. You can say whatever you want. Go for it.
Yeah. No, I think it's really getting quite alarming, actually. When you think about what started happening about 1900 and how they changed the food that we took for granted, and started refining it and taking all the minerals out, and then they started commercial fertilizing the soil, and it just destroyed the mineral content. And then they started attacking the water supply, and then we've got the added burden of a lot of pharmaceutical medications today that really are what are called magnesiuric, which means they drain the body of magnesium. We could spend a whole show on just that one word, but then you add the additional issues of EMFs, lack of sleep, worrying about the economy, and then it goes on and on and on. I guess I tend to approach it a couple different ways. Yes, generationally, we are becoming weaker and weaker. If people will step back and look at the articles and headlines, they'll see that younger and younger people are getting really, really sick. I'll give you a prime example of that. When I was 12 years old, my grandmother, who was 76 years old, died of her third heart attack.
Wow.
It was very sad, but that was kind of normal. You expected people in their 70s to pass away. Last spring, a little boy named Isaac Arzat, who lived in Eugene, Oregon, died at the age of 12 of his second heart attack.
Wow. That's young.
And just take those two data points and you say something's wrong with this picture. Yeah. And what's happening is stressed out moms are producing stressed out babies, are growing up to be stressed out moms producing more stressed out babies. And I think it is in fact accelerating. And people sometimes say, "Oh, come on, you're getting into the Chicken Little syndrome." But about 15 months ago, my partner, Dr. Liz Erkenswick, and I, her area of passion is to do adjustments of newborns to deal with the birth trauma. And over this particular 4-month window, there were 3 moms who came in with their children, really upset about the fact that their child had a genetic defect and was going to require some kind of hypermedication. And I went, wow, that sounds serious. To each mom, I said, give me the name of that genetic defect. And they did. They dutifully gave me the name. And while they were in with their child getting adjusted, I went to Google, put the name of that so-called defect, and put the phrase magnesium deficiency after it. And guess what? In all 3 cases, voila, magnesium deficiency. After it happened the 3rd time, I called up my sister Paige, and she was a pediatric nurse for 20 years, and she was practicing during the 1970s and 1980s. And I said, I'm just curious, was this a problem when you were practicing and you were a pediatric nurse on the floors? And she said, well, actually, it did happen from time to time. She said, apparently doctors don't know about the magic of magnesium. She said, because invariably, if we had a child that did not thrive, which happens, we would give them a magnesium IV, and boom, they perked up right away.
Wow.
And that was a stunning revelation to realize, oh my gosh, they don't know. The doctors, to their credit, are only doing what they've been taught, and they have not been taught about the central role that magnesium plays in the physiology of the body, and they've not been taught how easily lost it is due to stress. And I think that's in large part the whole issue of what's happening, and we are seeing this multi-generational depletion taking place in society.
Well, I also see this too, like even our soil quality too. You keep on hearing about the depletion of magnesium. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, again, the minerals exist in a balance. There's a constant dance. The 4 that are particularly important in our body are calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. They're pretty important. So, but again, it's all got to be in the right balance. So what was commercial fertilizer? What has it been since the Second World War? NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Well, if phosphorus levels are really high, they keep magnesium levels down. The soil can't do both. They're on a seesaw. And when the soil is getting flooded with those chemicals year in and year out, it has a devastating effect. The studies that have been done recently have have shown that there's a marked loss of all the minerals in commercial soil versus organic soil. And Rutgers has done studies, and there's some oh my gosh, my mind's shutting down. The school.
It's okay, it doesn't matter. We'll get it later on.
The other schools have followed suit with this, and the added assault now is with the herbicides that are being used with GMOs. Now, probably have heard of Roundup. They think, wow, it's a cool name, Roundup. Let's get some Roundup. Well, it turns out that Roundup is nothing more than a mineral chelator. That's how it works. It chelates minerals in the soil to prevent the weeds from growing.
Wow.
Let's think about that for a minute. So it chelates the minerals in the soil and stops the weeds. Do you think it might affect the mineral content of the plant? Of course it does. And then that stuff gets in the food, and do you think it then would go on to continue to chelate in our body? It's a very good possibility. And there's some really good studies to that effect that have shown the devastating effect of GMO inside the human body. We don't need to talk about that.
So how would you actually then recommend or suggest to people to get their magnesium?
Well, what I like to do, because that's the first question everybody wants to know. All right, so what should I take? What I really ask people to do is to get some baseline testing done. Firm believer in the hair analysis, for those who haven't ever had that done, It's a great way to look at all of the minerals, or not all, but the 15 most important minerals in your body, as well as 8 heavy metals.
Yeah,
that's a good test to do. And then the second test that I really recommend is that people get what's called the magnesium red blood cell test, otherwise known as the MAG-RBC. And for the folks north of the border, it's called the elemental analysis of packed erythrocytes.
That's a tongue twister.
And I've always thought of Canadians as being folks who love simplicity.
Yeah.
That name just drives me crazy. But it's elemental analysis of packed erythrocytes. And erythrocytes are just red blood cells. That's all they are. And what you get back is the 4 basic electrolytes. And that's a really good test to have as a baseline. And the reason why I focus on that is that there are too many practitioners out there who don't believe that magnesium deficiency is a crisis. And what I want clients to do is to focus on having credible, reliable, blood-based testing to prove that it's an issue. And then when people start to introduce magnesium and they get better, then they can connect the dots for their doctor. We're going to educate the doctors by the patients. I don't think it's going to happen in medical school. But to get to your question about, so what should I take? I'm a firm believer in what's called the full court press. Everybody is always looking for the killer application. What's the one magnesium that I need that's going to work 100% of the time? Well, everybody's different, as you well know. What I have is what I call a killer strategy with multiple sources. I like to focus on magnesium-rich foods, grass-fed organ meats, nuts and seeds like cashews and almonds and pistachios and pumpkin seeds and chia seeds. Those are great sources of magnesium. Leafy greens. But again, make sure they're organic because it's the only ones that are going to have the minerals in them. And then seafood. Seafood's a great source, especially oysters. To the extent that you have a good source of clean oysters, it's a great source of minerals, particularly magnesium. So foods are very, very important. But you can't stop there. In part because a lot of people don't have enough hydrochloric acid in their stomach to pull the magnesium out of the food. And then to make matters even worse, a lot of people have what's called leaky gut, and they can't absorb the minerals even if they are pulled out. So it's important to focus on the foods, but then to supplement in their routine. I advocate supplementing with a good bioavailable form of magnesium. The two that we regularly go to are magnesium malate by Jigsaw Health and magnesium glycinate by Pure Encapsulations. We get great results with those two. Stay away from magnesium oxide. I personally don't think that magnesium citrate allows you to get to therapeutic dose, but that's a point of debate. But the important thing is make sure it's a bioavailable form. Third, supplement with magnesium-based water or mineral-rich water. You can do both. There are a couple sources. Carolyn Dean has a great product called Remag, and then there's a company down in South Carolina called Complete H2O Minerals, and it's called Ultimate Mag, and it's just a great source of just some drops in the water, and it's just got full of ionic magnesium. And then firm believer in mineral drops, and we use the folks out of Salt Lake City concentrated mineral drops, and the Anderson family's been making, and they also have a product called Elite, the Elite line of products. They're great for providing those electrolytes. And then another option for people is transdermal. Big believer in transdermal. The skin, what's the largest organ on the body? It's your skin.
Yeah.
Right. And so magnesium chloride oil or Epsom salt baths. And a new product that I'm getting introduced to is magnesium MSM. And so,
interesting.
Yeah, great source of sulfur.
Yeah.
And apparently works wonders. And there's a woman out of the Philippines, Mary Jean, who's been on the Magnesium Advocacy Facebook page, and she's been extolling the virtues of magnesium MSM. So
interesting.
It comes in a spray form, and definitely look into that. And then the final form is just um, using salts that have lots of magnesium and potassium in them, either right salt or Fortis salt. Again, the Anderson family in Salt Lake City. So that's a lot of different ways, but I'm a firm believer in saturating the lifestyle with magnesium just because of the burn rate that we were talking about.
Yeah. Well, we also got to take in consideration they may be adding all this, magnesium supplements and foods, but at the same time, everybody needs to also be considering taking away what's stealing the magnesium in the first place. So really focusing on not eating the SAD diet, focusing on quality meats that have magnesium, quality vegetables, quality tubers, nuts, and seeds. So before even beginning to add anything, I think we should also focus our attention on elimination. What's causing the depletion in the first place, right?
Very, very well said. Make sure back to the issue of sucrose, limit the amount of sugars in your diet. Another one that is kind of, a lot of people miss this, but the emphasis on calcium supplementation has totally thrown people into a tailspin. Most people are not aware of that. And then at the risk of being branded a heretic, I to stay away from vitamin D.
Mm-hmm.
People understand what that hormone is all about. It's the oldest hormone on the, and we, as a species, we've coexisted with that hormone for hundreds of millions of years.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's become a crisis in the last 10? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So the way I look at,
I'll tell you the crisis. The crisis is us not going outside. That's the crisis.
That is the crisis.
Yeah.
And what most people don't know is that, again, there are 3 transactions to move cholesterol under our skin to active vitamin D in our kidney, and all 3 of those transactions require magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when people get their vitamin D blood test back and they're freaking out because, oh my goodness, my vitamin D is low, it's like, no. What it's telling you is that your magnesium level is low.
Yeah.
What's really telling you is your calcium level in your blood is hyperbolic.
Yeah.
And like, oh, they get so tongue-tied they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But vitamin D, the great way to think about vitamin D is it's calcium on steroids. That's its job.
Mm-hmm.
Take calcium out of the food. It does it in the intestine. Take it out of the food and put it in the bloodstream. That's vitamin D's job. And the reason why the blood test is low is the body's trying to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
Because it knows there's too much calcium and it doesn't want more active vitamin D because it's only going to add more calcium to the blood. And the body's trying to say, stop, we can't have any more calcium. So that's an important thing that a lot of your viewers are going to go, yeah, that's not what the research is saying. And I would challenge people to really get behind the curtain on the research. I think it's a big game myself.
Yeah, that's the problem with today's time. People might just be looking at abstracts on PubMed or just hearing hearsay what they hear on the internet, but they're not doing any in-depth research themselves, right?
No.
So, what's the saying? Don't judge a book by its cover. We'll really go into the book and see what's happening. See biochemically. Well, this is the mechanism. It's not like we're making this stuff up.
No, and one of the great issues that people around the world have gotten tied up in knots about is cholesterol.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, my cholesterol level. Well, the guy that invented the cholesterol crisis was named Ansel Keys.
Mm-hmm.
Very smart guy, professor of physiology at the University of Minnesota. Well, I'd read a lot of research about why it was controversial, but I'd never read the very first article he wrote where he branded cholesterol as, quote-unquote, the bad guy. Or at least that was what I was led to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, to the 1953 article in the American Journal, he never said that at all. It just, somehow it got spun into this social construction of reality that cholesterol is the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. You've got to get behind the covers and read the research and see what it really says for yourself, and don't buy into the party line.
Very true. Actually, talking about research, I've recently heard that you're actually writing a book about magnesium, or some like really interesting book? Actually, I find it fascinating.
Well, the book title is Magnificent. My tongue's right. Magnificent Magnesium. I actually haven't been drinking. I swear to God. Magnificent Magnesium, the essential key to a healthy heart.
Mm-hmm.
I've decided to take on the entire field of cardiology and have done a lot of research. And the co-author of the book is a great cardiologist in New York City by the name of Dennis Goodman, trained in South Africa and came to the States a number of years ago, professor of medicine at NYU Medical Center. And we're writing this very controversial book about it's magnesium, stupid. That's the myth. Yeah. And it's actually been a lot of fun to do research and now be in a position of pulling it all together.
Mm-hmm.
But there are 3 theories for heart disease, and I'll just share this real quickly for the viewers. The first theory that's been holding us hostage for about 50 years is it's the diet heart hypothesis that was theorized by Ansel Keys.
Mm-hmm.
Cholesterol causes plaque, and plaque blocks up the artery, and then good night, Irene. Well, it turns out that every facet of the diet heart hypothesis is neutralized by magnesium. Whether we're talking about platelet aggregation, the endothelial dysfunction, the whole concept, most of what causes plaque is calcium. Guess what keeps calcium in check? Magnesium.
Yeah.
Every facet of it is neutralized by magnesium. So that, I think the bloom is off that rose. So in 2002, a cardiologist by the name of Libby, Dr. Libby, published an article in Circulation magazine about the relationship between inflammation and atherosclerosis, or arterial plaque. And this is a very popular article. It's been referenced by 9,500 other researchers.
Wow.
That's like wow is right. Like, oh my gosh, it's inflammation. Oh you mean it's not cholesterol, but it's everyone's all a Twitter about inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, Stephen Sinatra and Johnny Bowden, who you probably know those names, just published a book about the cholesterol myth.
Yeah, that's right.
Saying, yeah, it's not cholesterol. Wink, wink. It's inflammation.
Yeah.
Well, what they completely ignored was the research that took place 10 years before by Professor Weglicki and Terry Phillips at George Washington University, that was published in the American Journal of Physiology, which is a 5-star source of information. And they proved that the precursor to the production of substance P, and the P stands for production, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the chemical that produces all the inflammatory chemicals. Substance P is where it starts. And the precursor is magnesium deficiency. Thank you very much. And so what's interesting to note is that 57 people have cited Dr. Weglicki and Phillips' article, but 9,500 have cited Dr. Libby's article. And when you compare the body of knowledge that Dr. Weglicki put together, 50 articles over the last 20 years, to the one article that everyone says is the answer, it's like comparing a cartoon to War and Peace.
That's crazy.
And every facet of inflammation, 100%, I don't care whether you get down into the genetic level, heat stress proteins, that's the precursor to inflammation.
Yeah.
Right? Guess what causes that?
Lack of
magnesium.
Yeah.
Ding. And so what we're basically proving is that in this book, that those 2 theories are completely unfounded, that it's an issue of magnesium, and in fact, what is at the epicenter of heart disease is a heart muscle starved for energy. And the only way that the heart muscle gets energy is when ATP is complexed with magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best source of ATP? Where does the heart muscle get 90% of the ATP that it uses all day long? You want to guess where that comes from?
I don't know. Can you tell us, Morley?
It's long chain fatty acids.
Yeah.
Saturated fat. But that saturated fat gets metabolized inside the cell, inside the mitochondria, and if magnesium's not present, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And if magnesium's not attached to it, the heart muscle cell can't work.
Yeah.
And so a whole new emerging theory by Dr. Ingwall at Harvard, and it's called the starved heart theory of heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
They're right out about it. But guess what? They never, ever, ever, ever mention the mineral magnesium.
Wow.
So all Dennis and I is just introducing magnesium into that theory, starved heart theory, and voila, we've solved all of heart disease.
That's fantastic. When are you looking to release that book?
The book will be available probably July 1.
Okay.
We're on the final stages of actually writing it, but then it's got to go through editorial review and what have you.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's going to take several months to do that, but I think by July 1, and what we're going to do is have people go to our website, to www.gotmag.org, and there'll be a link there to sign up for the book, and once it's available, some people will notice. But we've got a book trailer that I think rocks. It's very, very cool. I'll send you the link.
Send me the link for sure. Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I should have done that before the show, because you would actually be jazzed when you.
Awesome.
But, every aspect of heart disease, whether we're talking about angina, all the way to myocardial infarct, and everything in between.
Mm-hmm.
Any type of heart disease that you've ever heard about is all born of magnesium deficiency, which prevents ATP from getting to the heart muscle cells.
Wow.
Period.
That's amazing. Well, I'm really happy to hear that you're coming out with the book. And I always like to ask my guests, the last thing in the episode is, give us your number one health optimal tip. Like, what's that number one tip that you can give us? And I'm pretty sure I can guess already, but tell us in the most simplistic way, like your super number one health tip.
Let's see. That's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked. It's never been asked quite that way. This might throw you a little bit for a curve, but I alluded to it this morning in my notes on Facebook. What I would really encourage people to do is, we live in a hypersympathetic environment.
Mm-hmm.
And sympathetic environments are ruled by calcium. Calcium is in fact the mineral that activates the sympathetic nervous system, period. And the mineral that calms the sympathetic response and allows for the use of the parasympathetic response is magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
So what I love the listeners to do is, at least once a week, and if they can do it more often than that, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, do a magnesium bath.
Mm-hmm.
With using magnesium sulfate, Epsom salt, or magnesium chloride oil. I would really encourage people to take a bath. Why? Because the very act of being horizontal puts you into a parasympathetic mode, as opposed to a shower, which is sympathetic.
Yeah.
You're standing. But halfway through that bath, most people can tolerate about a 30-minute bath, so about 15 minutes into it, this is what I want the viewers to do. I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to give heartfelt thanks to all the blessings in your life. And really feel the sensation in your heart. Very, very important to visualize it. Close your eyes and visualize all those things that you've been blessed with. And when they've studied that process of gratitude with a PET scanner, the brain lights up like a Christmas tree.
It's amazing.
It really is amazing. And more than the emotion of joy, more than the emotion of excitement, and more than the emotion of love, gratitude activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what starts the healing process.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, take tons of magnesium, but that's an innovative way of getting people to really change their state and begin to introduce the healing process into their lives.
Wow. Well, that's an amazing optimal health tip. I want to thank you, Morley, for taking your time out the day to be on the show with us. You gave us so much information today, so much knowledge today. You hear that, folks? Use that tip. It'll benefit you in your life. Once again, thank you, Morley, and have a great day, brother.
You bet, Amir. Thanks so much for your time.
Hey, man. Thank you, man. Wow, guys, today's episode was absolutely fantastic with Morley. We learned so much things about magnesium, so I really hope you take this information and use it. Now, today's episode would not be possible if it wasn't for you. You know, as a family together, we spread the information, knowledge. So if you haven't already, please head over to amirrosic.com. And when you join the Optimal Tribe, you're going to be receiving exclusive content every single week. So I interview the world's best experts. I only bring the world's best experts to you. You're going to receive top-notch articles I write every single week. I spend time in, time again, researching the most important and beneficial information that you need. So all you got to do is head over to amirrosic.com and join the Optimal Tribe. Until next week, guys, have an amazing week.